All right, you guys, welcome back to another video. If you're 26 years old, this is the video you need to be watching. And I'm going to get straight into it and just to lay down the groundwork so you can understand where I've been, where I'm going, and then maybe get you to understand what you can do to do something different. So 26 is a very important age, and I'll tell you why. It is a fork in the road moment. The thing is, at 26, your prefrontal cortex begins to mature. And what that means is that your concept of time, the idea of the future, begins to crystallize and you start seeing it, right? And the idea is that hopefully you get to the point where, well, you start to question yourself, what am I supposed to be doing? And the habits, whether good or bad, begin to pile up on themselves. And if you've been doing good things, then you will start to reap the benefits of those positive habits. However, if you've been doing bad, if you've been leaning into bad habits, then those start to compound on themselves and you start to notice the severity, right? The negative sort of influence it's having on your life. Okay, so that is something to consider as well. So I mean, whether it's good or bad, you need to decide at this age whether you want to continue on that trajectory of bad, right? Of things going bad, of not having any momentum, of not chasing your goals, of being afraid to fail. If you want to continue on that trajectory, be my guest. But if you, like I, at 26, have decided that no, this is not the path I want to take and I want to forge a different way, then you need to decide right now, because this is the age, right? Where you're further into your 20s and you're about to get into your 30s. And so there's nothing really sexy about doing destructive things. I think you can get away with it when you're younger, but as you get older, you don't have the luxury of playing those kind of games with your life. Time is of the essence. So you got to understand this. You got to be able to survive the scenario. And what I mean by this is, imagine this, right? I'm 19 years old. I'm in an Astro van riddled with bullets, with a couple dudes in the backseat hotboxing, doing crystal meth, right? One of those guys I just spoke to a few days ago, still doing crystal meth in the same bedroom he was doing it when we were 19 years old. Luckily, I never touched that stuff. The other guy is somewhere in jail, right? I don't know where. And then, the other guy, I think he got his stuff together. I don't know, we lost touch. But the point is, imagine being in that environment, right? Surrounded by that type of energy, right? Where people were just kind of using their youth for vice and not really prioritizing the future or anything like that, right? But that was the crowd I was around. That was the environment I was in. And so you have to ask yourself, is this the kind of life I want to live? And I realized at the time, I thought it was fun, but I realized, that I needed to do something different, and that if I continued on this path, that nothing really positive was going to come out of it. And so I told myself for sure I wanted a different type of life. And when I made that decision, well, then I needed to do something, right? I needed to back up the ideas that I had in my head. What was I going to do next? And so you had to be able to escape that bubble that you're in. And I can look back and say I've come a long way, right? I've come a long way from smoking weed every day, from being lazy, from not having any goals, from not having any momentum, not even trying to move the needle. Partly because comfort is so comforting, right? It's easier to stay in a comfortable place. It's a lot harder to whip yourself into a frenzy, a lot harder. And especially, like I said, if you've been compounding these bad habits over time, it's just easy to stay there, hard to get out of it. So I understand if you feel, that way. But you gotta, like I said, you gotta understand also too, the most important thing is there will be a transition period where the people that you were once friends with, going back to the dudes in the Astro van, those people no longer suited me, right? I was transitioning. I was becoming a different person. I needed to surround myself with different type of people. And in between that, I had that lonely phase where I wasn't sure what I wanted to be or who I wanted to be or what I thought I should be. And so I had a bit of an identity crisis, and it was a very awkward period for me. I was really awkward, weird, socially. I was really off, stylistically, just everything, right? I didn't know how to be. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to be. So, in the midst of trying to figure that out, obviously you're going to fumble right? A lot of the times you're going to fumble, right? The play, you're not used to the moment. And so that's part of it. So you need to understand that it is frightening, but you need to be patient with yourself. And maybe there will be moments where will get down on yourself, but you need to understand that you're going to play the long game, and that requires you to learn lessons along the way. And then you have to think about it. You have to kind of, you have to come up with a new version of yourself, and that sometimes can be very painful for anyone, for a lot of us. And realize that you cannot stand still. You need to be built for movement, and if you do that, you can outrun a lot of your mistakes. You can forget about them faster because you're just creating new experiences, and you don't have to keep looking back at the bad ones so often. So it's going to take a while for the new version of you to catch up, to assimilate what's happening. But when you do, then that's when you really become an expert, if you will, at this new being that you are, right? You begin to familiarize yourself with this new version of yourself. But bear in mind, I mean, it's such an important year, because the people that I have noticed that have decided to continue the same route after 26, they have gotten worse. They don't have the need to change it. It's too much. They're too far gone. Of course, right? If you're over 26, I'm not trying to exaggerate this. There is a possibility, but I've seen many examples of people over 26 that if they didn't correct those habits early enough, it was too late for them, and they're a lost cause. And I can see them now, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not surprised that they continued on the same trajectory, because they didn't have that fork in the road moment. They didn't have that moment where they said to themselves, I either have to do something about it, or I can just continue on the same path. And I think, to me, I was just frankly just disgusted with the path that I was on. I felt like I could look outside and stare into the distance and really feel like life was on pause for me, and not in a good way. I felt that time didn't matter. I felt stuck, and it was a heavy sort of burden, and I just needed to crawl myself out of it. The thing was, I didn't know how, because I didn't really have examples that I could look for or look to. But the one saving grace I did have was reading books, because that allowed me to sort of dive into different worlds and kind of get out of the world I was in. And that allowed me to kind of slowly get unstuck. But the growing pains are so important. Like all those moments that were cringy, that I was embarrassed about, now looking back, they were so important to my growth. And so you have to be patient with yourself. You don't be so hard on yourself in that regard. You gotta allow yourself to make those mistakes. But 26 is so important. Do not take it lightly. I just that's all I can say, is just to make sure that you take it very serious. And at the same time, taking things very serious is also taking things very lightly at the same time. And it'll make sense when you're in that position, when you realize that you don't have to look back on things and regret anything. So anyhow, I hope this helps. If you're 26 years old, if you're about to turn 26, if you are over 26 and you still think that there's a chance for you, but you gotta, I mean, it's so important that you make the decision to make things different, because otherwise, like I said, it's a very dangerous time where the bad habits will just continue, and I don't see how you can correct them, unless there's a very, there's a, you're put in a position where you have to make a decision. So yeah, I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next one.